Watch this vidcast, or I'll gouge your eyes out.
Welcome back, Horror Hounds, to Ghostman and Rivera's Horror Show podcast.
I'm Mike Ghostman Pickle.
And I'm James Rivera. This is our second podcast, our second time doing a virtual podcast, and we're still getting used to this process of not doing it in person, but we're going to stick to it for as long as we have to.
This is Mike Pickle reporting from the hold.
On today's podcast, we're going to discuss a couple of new 2020 horror movies, The Platform and what's the other one?
The Room?
The Platform and The Room. And no, that is not Tommy Wiseau's The Room, so don't be alarmed, although in some ways that does qualify as a horror movie.
And it's not Room with Brie Larson either.
Yeah, they need
Third Room.
I'll be honest, I don't see how anybody would ever want to use that name for a movie again because of the associations. Because no matter what, whenever people look up this new horror movie, The Room, they're going to look to Tommy Wiseau's The Room, and they're going to get a horror of a completely different variety.
And it's not even a foreign movie, so it's 3 American movies that are all called Room.
Yes. At least the Brie Larson one had the good sense to remove the word "the" from the title.
Yeah. So besides that, we're also going to discuss The Stuff and Cheap Thrills.
All our listeners know we always open up with news, but news is particularly slow right now because of the quarantine and the lockdown. So
nobody's filming, nobody's releasing in theaters,
and everything is being pushed back. So we're going to do the news every 2 weeks from now on. So next week, you'll hear the news on our podcast. But before we get started with our movie reviews, we're going to share an interview that we conducted earlier today with a horror content creator, Ryan Joseph Murphy.
Horror show exclusive.
So we have Ryan Joseph Murphy with us today.
How's it going,
What's
guys?
up, Ryan?
Pretty good. So before we get started, do you say your middle name because people confuse you with Ryan?
Yeah, a little bit. I mean, because I'm my agent. I act is my other thing that I do, and so like Ryan Murphy's obviously already been taken, so I had to change it to something else, and that's totally cool. I respect his work immensely, so I'm fine with just being Ryan Joseph Murphy. That's fine.
I think we'll just leave the middle name out when we advertise it. Say, hey everybody, we got Ryan on the podcast.
That's totally cool, man. I'm all for guerrilla marketing that way. It's just yeah, that sounds great.
So what's up with so let's talk about your career before Welcome to the Horror Show. We'll talk about your show Welcome to the Horror Show in a minute. But what's up with the post-production on The Voice? The Voice?
Yeah, The Voice, man. Yeah, I was on the show for, about 4.5 years. And that's actually kind of what happened is I always wanted to act. So I moved to Los Angeles, and I had a friend of mine who was a post-production coordinator on the show. And I was like, hey, whatever, I don't care. I want to get experience, right? So I said, cool, let's just get thrown first into this thing. And I started as a transcriber. So I was transcribing ton of transcripts for the show, and you'd be shocked at how many transcripts there are for a show like that. It's insane. And for all the producers. And then after that, I moved into being a PA, then moved my way up to being a media coordinator, post-production coordinator, and I was there for a while. And it was amazing experience. I learned a ton about a side of the business that I don't think a lot of people know about, just how much work really goes into it. And for a show the size of The Voice, I mean, it's insane. How we had I want to say we had like 40 to 50 editors and another like 12 assistant editors and online editors. I mean, it's crazy. But yeah, that was kind of my life before I got an agent. And then once I did, I was like, I want to pursue acting full time. And so I left. But it was a great learning experience. It was awesome to just kind of see how that big of an operation works and just kind of how the day-to-day goes, and helped a lot for me just to kind of be able to create my own stuff and to, just kind of getting it from a different perspective. So
did you want to, all right, when you started off and you decided that you wanted to be in like productions and films and television, did it take you a while to figure out that you wanted to be an actor, or did you know you just wanted to be a part of it?
Yeah, I always had a thing for acting, just more so than anything. I did acting in high school and middle school, theater and whatnot. And then you want to make it a career. and I went to Cal State Fullerton for theater. But you don't realize that theater acting and film acting are just completely different things, and they're really different beasts, and it takes a whole lot of skill to maneuver between them. And I think for me, when I made the choice, I was like, this is really what I want to do. But you know, obviously now with kind of creating a show and directing and stuff and writing, I've kind of branched out to different areas. But my true love is still acting. I love doing it. It's just the funnest thing in the world.
So tell us about the move into the horror genre, and specifically Welcome to the Horror Show.
Yeah, man. I mean, so growing up, I loved the Twilight Zone, and I'm 32, so obviously I was not alive when it first aired. But I grew up, and a lot of my family really liked it, and I used to watch all the marathons. I would memorize all the monologues from Rod Serling. I would do them at like dinner parties, and I loved the show. And I think if you guys can see, there's a picture of Rod Serling in the background there. He's my idol. He's my hero. And I obviously always had a penchant for that kind of entertainment. I loved anthologies, and I have a huge respect for Tales from the Crypt. I have all the DVDs. I've watched them a million times. It's awesome. And for me, I think what it came down to was like, I was thinking about, I love horror, and I was like, how can I do horror in today's age where it's like, if I can't have the financing for a huge film, if I can't get the financing to do like a 30 episode TV series where it's a long serialized thing, what can we do that we can do with a smaller budget but still make it look really good and still have something that can be different in this age? And for me, it's like, I just think more than anything, like people's viewing habits are changing so rapidly. And I think we're seeing this now too because of the quarantine and the viruses. Like people will watch stuff at any length at this point because they want to be entertained, they're bored. And for us, we were like, well, what if we were to do like an anthology series like Twilight Zone, like Tales from the Crypt, and make it like a situation where we could have a short and chop it up into different pieces and make every piece be like a cliffhanger on its own and serialize it like that. So one episode can become 5 different pieces of content. And so that's how we kind of looked at this and how we kind of went about this. And I think it just kind of evolved from there. And then thinking about, well, what kind of stories can we tell in this type of like frame? What type of things can we actually say about the world and about horror in this type of like genre format? And that's kind of where I think it got bore out of like wanting to do something like this.
I really liked the series the series because it reminded me a lot. It takes a lot of the best aspects of Tales from the Crypt, and I told you earlier before this interview started, it reminded me so much of Tales from the Crypt, with the way that you host, the quips, the morality tale aspect of it, and a little bit of the Twilight Zone. And I like that you put a modern twist on it by making it serialized in a way that shows like the Twilight Zone or Tales from the Crypt never would have been serialized.
Thank you so much, James. That really means a lot. Like I said, those are like those are the two places where I really kind of wanted to draw from. And then we obviously had an amazing team behind us that really helped us to do all this. We wanted to make sure it was really, the quality was not like something you were going to see on just any Joe Schmo internet channel. It was going to be like, hey, the sound quality's good, the writing's good, the acting's good. I mean, we got Virginia Montero, who was in La Calavera. She was on Breaking Bad. She actually played Tuco's grandma on that show.
That's Tuco's grandma?
Yeah, that was Tuco's grandma.
I knew I recognized her.
Yeah, she's so, oh man, she's just incredible. And my agent is thankfully reps her. And so she was able to talk to her and be like, hey, look, I've got one of my clients who wants to do this. Do you want to be involved? And she was like, yeah, I'll do it. And she just was a total pro on the set. I mean, just incredible.
So what came first, your narrator character or the stories?
The stories actually were filmed first. Okay. So what we did is that we had all the scripts written, and my head writer, Grace Murphy, who couldn't be on here, she's working on her thesis right now. She told me though, she's like, I trust you, get on there with those guys. You're totally good. So she's doing that, but she's my head writer, and she directed 2 of the episodes. But we really wanted to have for the stories, like you were saying, James, kind of a morality play a little bit. I love horror, and I love all genres of horror, slashers, psychological, zombies, any of that stuff, classic monsters. But at the end of the day, I also want to say, like, what can horror bring to, the 21st century in terms of like, what can we say about modern life through horror? And I think that's kind of how we're looking at these stories through that lens, is how can we use different genres and kind of put them into the short short little box, the short little format, and still say something meaningful kind of about life. And I think that Grace did a really good job with Turkey Sleigh. I wrote Ping because of my experiences with driving for Uber and Lyft, and then Martin Julio Castillo wrote La Calavera based upon his kind of family traditions and experiences.
So another thing that I liked about it is the Ping and Turkey Sleigh in particular are things that could only have been written for our era. They wouldn't make sense in any other context.
No, for sure. And I mean, like, I think too, I know that Quibi's doing this now with a new show, but like Uber and Lyft have been around now for what, between 5 and 7 years, I think, almost a decade. And there really hasn't been anything too meaningful in the horror genre, really, you know, showcasing the fears of that. I mean, I was a driver for like 2.5 years, and dude, there's some people who get in your car, it's frightening. I mean, like the stories that I have. And so like, for me, it was like, how can I harness this into something? Like, what could be an interesting story coming out of this, and how could it be told? And that's kind of where we went with that.
Do you ever?
So the segments are like 1 to 3 minutes, and then the full shorts are around 10 minutes.
Mm-hmm.
So do you film them knowing when you're going to cut them, or do you just film them in their entirety and then look for places to cut?
We usually, Grace and I, when we were writing the scripts, we were really trying to put in places in the script that was going to be like, we're thinking this is going to be our cliffhanger right here. And like for La Calavera, it came out a little shorter than we thought. It was like, I think it's like 7 minutes or 8 minutes. And we were like, okay, let's just cut this thing up into 4 and not do 5, because we don't want to cut it so much that there's no momentum for any story. We want to make it so it's like, hey, that's a meaningful ending, and that'll hopefully make people come back. And so when we're in the editing room with our amazing DP, Michael Donnelly, who also was able to do the editing for us too. He's just an incredible DP and a really good guy. And when we worked with him, we were just also utilizing him because he would put together the cuts. We'd watch the cuts in full, and then we start to look for like, okay, so let's look at where these chops can be placed in, and where we're thinking that this can fuel like a to be continued.
Okay.
Do you plan on doing more acting besides your host character?
I would absolutely love to. Yeah. I mean, I go out on auditions. I mean, I can probably say this now. I went on audition for that movie Vice, and I was in the running for a character there. And there's been other stuff my agents got me out for, but this is the first thing that I felt like that I've done that has really utilized kind of my penchants for what I want to do as an actor. And like this character for me was something that, when I practiced it with my girlfriend, we were constantly talking about like, what can I bring to this type of character that will still be really fun, amusing, and kind of make people go, hey, I want to see more of the show, because I really like not only this character, but I like that these stories that are coming out of it.
Well, you mentioned that the way people view content is changing. Is that the reason why you chose to just put the show on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter?
Yeah, I mean, that was kind of the thing about it is, we wanted to release this kind of like without having any gatekeepers in between us. And don't get me wrong, like my agent right now is, I think I can talk to you guys about this right now, but my agent right now is talking to production companies about our stuff, and we're slowly getting meetings together at this point to kind of expand the potential place where this show can be viewed. But at the same time, I just think social media is kind of an untapped place for specifically like really good multimedia stuff. Like you can put on really good, shorts. I mean, I know that there's, what was I going to say right now? Gunpowder and Sky has their whole channel that I think it's Alter, that has amazing horror shorts. And I mean, they're viewed by 100,000 people, when they put them on. So I think that there's a place for this, and it's just a matter of where's this going to go. Don't get me wrong too. We have our full cuts of these shorts that we love to put out to festivals, but obviously with everything going on right now, that's kind of on hold. So.
Okay. Yeah, that's what we're dealing with right now. We got a feature film that we're putting in festivals right now. It's a bit of a nightmare and unpredictable.
Right?
You don't know. Yeah. You don't know how it's going to play out.
Well, that's
still uncertain.
That's the thing. I mean, it's just we're in such a weird time right now, and I think with everything going on, it just opens up like how well people see this at some point if this doesn't come back. And I'm hoping. I mean, dude, I love watching movies in the theater. Don't get me wrong. It's an amazing thing. It's just with all this happening, things are, I think, going to change, unfortunately. So,
Go ahead.
Do you think that the movie going experience is something that's going to disappear a lot more rapidly after the quarantine? Or do you think there might be a demand for it now only because people are going to be stuck inside their houses for so long? Because I've heard things going either way. I'm hoping the latter one.
I mean, here's the thing. I love going to Alamo Drafthouse. So that's my favorite place to go to watch a movie. I go watch their movies. My girlfriend and I will constantly go there at the Alamo Drafthouse. They just opened in downtown LA. I don't know where you guys are both located, but so it's an amazing place to watch a movie. I mean, it's so fun. We watched Once Upon a Time in Hollywood there, and they had the trailers in front, kind of like talking about stuntmen and how they work. And I mean, there's nothing that can beat that experience besides a movie theater. And I think that there's something magical about that. At the same time, you now have like services like Quibi popping up where it's like, hey, if you want to walk around and just do free time and watch something that's really high quality on your phone, you can do that. So it's going to be, I think, a mishmash. I think people will, some people who are maybe on the younger side may not go to movies as much anymore. But I think for those of us who are in our 30s and 40s who grew up with going to movies, I don't think that's going to end. I just think it'll obviously change a little bit because of what's been happening.
So your last episode was posted around December or January, right? So were you in production when the whole lockdown happened?
No, we weren't. So we had released all 3 of those episodes, and we had actually gotten them done. I think we got La Calavera done a couple weeks before we released it. We finally got the edited version done of it, and we were in the midst of creating and writing new episodes. We have 4 or 5 ideas that we want to do for our next set of episodes, and then that's when the lockdown happened. We're like, okay, we're in the midst of kind of getting production going and talking to people and saying, hey, can we organize some times to do this? And then that's when it hit. And we were like, okay, we're out of commission for a second.
Okay. So why are there no credits on the videos? Is that a conscious decision to keep an air of mystery about them?
That's actually, yeah, we have credits on the full length shorts. So we actually have them on there. But yeah, for the Instagram crowd and the Facebook crowd, we were all like, look, I don't know if people are going to stay and watch all these credits through. So let's just take them off. And then when we have these full shorts and when we air them, we'll have those credits at the end there.
Do you have a place where you're airing them in their entirety, the full length right now, or you just have them off to the side?
Yeah, we got them locked right now. Yeah, we haven't released all 3 of the full cut features yet. We have them locked just because a lot of these festivals that we're talking to are saying, hey, because that's the other thing too. I approached these festivals and I said, look, we already have these online. I know that you guys say for some of these festivals, they're like, if you post anything online, it gets disqualified. And they were really cool about us. They were like, look, since this is not a full length feature or a short that you have aired in its entirety and it's broken up, we'll accept it if you guys want to present us with the full length short. So we were like, cool, that's really cool. And so we were able to kind of like talk to some great festivals. I mean, we're talking to Fantastic Fest, who's like, hey, we really love your stuff. And yeah, if you guys have full length and if they're doing the festival, they'll definitely be considered.
So you already have the full length ones edited together as a full length short film?
We do actually. We have one cut that's a whole 3 episodes, so it's about 30 minutes. That's one long kind of episode with each one kind of coming in, and then we have each one as an individual episode. So it's like, we can submit Ping on its own to a festival, we can submit Turkey Slay on its own, or we can submit La Calavera on its own, and then we have one long one if people want to see all 3.
Did you have to edit them separately then? Because that's 2 different ways of editing the way that you do. Because on each one, on the next episode, since it leaves off on a cliffhanger, it goes back a little bit just so the audience could see what the last cliffhanger was. Does that...
Yeah, what we did was that when we would have Michael edit the episodes, we would make a full-length version first. So he would make that, and that's the first cut of it. And then after that, we would go back and then reformat it based upon where our chapter cuts would be. And so that's what happened after that. So then all he needed to do was make one long cut, add the credits, and then we were done.
Okay.
So what's your ultimate goal for the show, and also what's your ultimate goal for your career in general?
That's a good question. I think with the show, look, at this point, we're seeing, I think, a little bit of a resurgence of anthology series, especially when it comes to just different formats and places that they're going to be. I mean, You have obviously. Was that sorry?
Especially horror.
Especially horror. I think there's no doubt that horror is just usually a pretty profitable genre. I mean, it's one of those things that people just love it. We, all of us are horror fans. We watch a lot of schlock. We watch a lot of stuff that might not be considered great horror, but hey, it's horror. It's fun. We watch it. And so I think for us, what we've been looking at is like, look, we have this concept, this format for the show as it stands right now, but there's no doubt that if someone were to come to us and say, hey, look, we want to do a 30-minute version of this show, we'd be like, okay, great, let's talk about doing a 30-minute version of this. And on the other end of that, if there was a way to do this and keep doing it, and we have what we have, we would keep it at that too. I think it just becomes, where is there opportunities? Because I think there's going to be more opportunity for people who are creators like all of us here are. I think that there's more opportunities with advertisers than we think moving into the future, where they're going to go, hey, look, if you have this many followers on social media and they're watching your stuff, why don't we sponsor your content? And then you guys can have it be something to an effect of like, maybe we're using costumes from a costume store or makeup from a makeup store, something to that effect, where they're going, hey, look, we'll put this into creating these things. And then if you'll advertise that we're the ones doing it, like, yeah, okay. And I just think it becomes, whatever, like I said, my agent's talking to production companies right now. And I think at the end of the day, I would love, and I think Grace and I would really love to have this show be something that is our career, to be able to really do like a full blown, let's do 20 episodes in a season type of thing, and let's get them all out there. And I just think it depends on what avenue goes with that. And for me, I mean, I would love to continue this character, write more of these stories. That would be awesome. And then in general, just act, man. I mean, I respect filmmakers so much. And if there's a part that I could play that's going to be something that's meaningful and fun, hell yeah, I want to do it.
Cool. Who did your makeup for that character?
Her name is Tierra. She actually is an incredible makeup artist. She did the makeup for the whole show. The makeup for that character took 4 hours. So I was in a chair for
4 hours.
What was that?
So each time it's 4 hours.
Yeah, we filmed all of that. All of those intros were actually filmed in the same location. So we did it in one day. And so I got in the makeup chair really early, and I got it pounded out. And then we actually, funny story, we only had about 2 hours left in that location when I was done with makeup. We did not think it was going to take 4 hours. And so we had to run through those intros pretty quickly. And I cannot be more happy of how they turned out, because that location that we got, which is in Los Angeles, is just an incredible spot. I mean, it looks amazing for this type of thing. And you walk in and it looks like you're in a haunted house. It's incredible.
Cool. Well, I have to mention how crazy it was how we met. Now, you posted your narrator character in a horror group. And I looked and I was like, whoa, it's his show is horror show like mine. I have a horror show.
Yeah.
And, whoa, he has a horror host and I have a horror host, and we're both influenced by Twilight Zone. I wanted my character to be like a evil Rod Serling. Nice. And you're going for like the same type of thing. So because of that, I think one day we should collaborate on something for sure.
Oh, dude, I would love to. Yeah, and I love that your show's called Horror Show, and then our show's called Welcome to the Horror Show. It's pretty great. It's pretty awesome.
I can see our host Elliot mingle with your. Do you have a name for your host, or is it just the narrator?
We actually don't have a name for him yet. We've been really stumped on that aspect of him, because we're just like, what is this guy's name? Like we're trying to figure that out. We've gone with the monster, we've gone with the narrator, the host, but the Crypt Keeper is iconic, right? Because you call him the Crypt Keeper. I mean, he's just, he's the guy who manages the crypt. I mean, that's who he is. So it's a tough thing of like, what is this guy's name? What is this like little backstory? Because I would love to come up with a name for him. We can find something good.
On an old Tales from the Crypt episode, they actually had one episode that was about the origins of the Crypt Keeper. You guys should probably do the same thing. Come up with the whole backstory of how he became the narrator.
We've actually thought about that. Yeah, that's a great idea. And we thought about like, what could we do for like, if we wanted to make a whole story about this character, what would be the backbone of that story? But yeah, we thought about it. It's a really cool idea.
Okay. I love the voice that you use for that character. Could you do a little bit of it for us?
Let me try to get into it right now. It's a little sound effecty for what, we manages the sounds on there, but let me get in here, but I think it was a little bit like a, Thank you for joining us on this haunted evening. If you find yourself a little bit aback because of the current proceedings, don't worry, it'll soon come to a head. I think the key is really keeping your face just like really like really still when you do that. But that really was influenced by that, like the Rod Serling and Crypt Keeper aspect tied together, like James was saying, those puns and just doing something fun with it.
I really like
Cool.
it a lot.
Yeah, the laugh.
Yeah, that's. I remember when I did it originally, because Grace was directing those intros, and I remember when I did it originally, I saw her face, and she was like busting, like she couldn't control it, and she was like had to move out, and like my what was it called, our director Michael afterwards just started busting up laughing. He's like, dude, that's so great. He's like, oh my god, that's amazing.
Very cool. So, what's your advice for other filmmakers and for other people who have a community page in general? What's your advice to get 6,211 followers on Instagram?
That's a good, yeah, it's tough, man. So, it's funny. Our Facebook page right now has about 2,200. Our Instagram has about 6,000. The biggest thing that we did, we went on a schedule for posting. I really like just hammer that home. Try to stick on a really set schedule for posting. Look up hashtags, figure out like what your hashtags are that are getting like good traction, follow those. And I think the other thing is just try to post compelling, unique, good content. And I just, the hard thing is too, is that with Instagram especially, a lot of people are checking stories now. That's just a really big aspect of Instagram. So if you have compelling stories, people will be like, hey, I want to follow you. I want to see what you're posting. And I know too, for Facebook, I know Facebook gets a lot of flack sometimes for it's just outdated. It's not the same as, not the same thing as cool anymore as Instagram and stuff. But man, Facebook has a giant user base, and it's pretty incredible how many people, if you have the right advertising, I mean, it's like I spent $10 on an ad on Facebook and I got 500 click-throughs, 500 likes, and it's pretty insane. So I would argue that there's a really big market for horror, and that's, you guys know this obviously because you're big into this business. We're all into this business, but horror fans want to support horror. I really believe that. And I think that if you can post compelling content that's just not the same regurgitated stuff everywhere and come up with a unique perspective, you can get people to come and follow you, and they want to interact with you, because let's face it, horror is the greatest genre in the world. There's nobody who argues about horror movies like they argue about comedies or dramas. You're not saying you're not seeing people go, oh, well, Harry Met Sally's definitely the best romantic comedy ever made. Like Halloween and Friday the 13th. You can argue about this forever.
For sure.
Really quick, Halloween or Friday the 13th?
I would go Halloween, but I would argue that in terms of its impact, I think Friday the 13th might have had a bigger impact now because of just the character. But I love the original Halloween. It's just, I think their series in totality is probably is just a little bit better for sure.
Okay.
How about you guys?
Halloween, easy for me. I'm a big Michael Myers person.
Yeah, your opinions align a lot with both of us.
No, I mean, at the end of the day, for me, it's just, I love the Friday the 13th movies in terms of what they bring, but I mean, it's just some of those movies were just like, man, there's just not a lot of story here.
Halloween felt more substantial.
For sure. Agreed. Yeah. And I'm a big fan of Season of the Witch. I know some horror fans are still on the fence and they hate it, but I loved it. I thought it was awesome.
Yeah, good anthology movie.
Separate. For sure.
So everyone has to check out Welcome to the Horror Show, and it's on Instagram at Your Horror Show, correct?
Yes, Your Horror Show.
Facebook.com/Your Horror Show.
Correct. Yep.
So you have 3 episodes out so far. The first one was Ping, written and directed by you, Ryan Joseph Murphy. Turkey Slay, written and directed by Grace Murphy. And then La Calavera, written by Martin Julio Castillo and directed by Grace Murphy also.
That's correct.
So, all 3 of them are really good. They work good in segments. I love how your narrator character opens the short and then he's kind of absent throughout and then he comes on for another little thing at the end. I think it's just enough, and it's just enough of the laugh just enough of the little quips and stuff. I really like what you're doing.
Dude, thank you so much, Michael, and I love what you guys are doing, man. And by the way, too, I work with, or not, I shouldn't say I work with, but I'm associated with two people on Twitter, horrorfam.com and mutantfam.com. I'll throw a shout out to those guys. Really good horror communities that are trying to really pump up horror creators and do a good job of promoting them. And I just would say, for sure, man, check out those guys, because I think your stuff is really good too. Pay Up looks awesome, and I told them about, hey, you should interview Michael and talk to him about this project, because it looks really cool.
Thanks so much, Ryan.
Really quick, before you go, what do you have a favorite horror movie?
Favorite horror movie? You know, I've been really debating that lately, because I'm going to be on another podcast called The Last Horror House in Philly, and their whole concept is that you have to argue a horror film as the best horror film ever made, and so but you can't use any of the past films that he's already done. So I'm like going through, and a movie that I've always loved that I feel like has never gotten its due and is just really cool is Lord of Illusions by Clive Barker.
Oh, yeah.
And I've always been a huge fan of that film. I love the noir elements of it. I think it has just enough gore to satisfy that, but it also has a cool, unique take on like the magic horror twist. And if I had to fight right now about what's your favorite horror movie, and people, you know, I couldn't go with the regulars, I would probably go with that. Otherwise, I would probably say The Thing. It's probably my favorite overall.
Both of those are excellent choices, though.
Yeah, I love. What about you guys? I'm curious. What would your guys' two be?
Mine would be Halloween. To me, Halloween is the ultimate horror film, but that's so cliche to say. My backup would be The Evil Dead.
Those are two amazing for sure, 100%.
Mine constantly changes from The Exorcist, The Texas Chainsaw Massacre,
And The Shining.
They flip flop back and forth. The Shining, yeah, stuff like that. The typical stuff.
Oh no, but all three of those are so great though. I'm sorry to hijack this. I'm just curious. Did you guys see Dr. Sleep? What did you guys think of it?
Oh
yes, yeah. I loved it.
I thought
it was so good.
Both Mike and I placed it. We did a podcast where we did our top 10 horror movies of 2019, and that was both on our top 10 of last year.
Yeah, I think there's no doubt. That was just an incredible. I was so shocked at how well Flanagan kind of managed to make a new movie, but also like really honor the Shining legacy. It was so good. So good.
Yeah, he's one of the directors to follow in horror for sure.
I agree. He's amazing. I really love his work a lot.
He has yet to make in my opinion, a single bad film.
No, I mean, you're right. I think he's correct me if I'm wrong, he directed Oculus too, right?
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, that was awesome. I loved Oculus. That was a really cool movie.
The Haunting of Hill House.
Yep.
And Gerald's Game, all of which I love.
Yeah, Haunting of Hill House was fantastic.
And it's really sad what happened to Before I Wake. How he couldn't release it, and the studio went bankrupt, and then it was tied up in red tape for the longest, and he didn't get to release it until his next film was already out. So he felt that was like, it came out and then it kind of went backwards in his career, but it's still a good movie.
Yeah, agreed. No, agreed. That's, and I didn't know all that insider stuff about it, but yeah, no, I thought it was still solid though too.
Yeah, definitely. Well, thanks again, Ryan, for coming on. We enjoyed talking to you, and again, everybody check out Welcome to the Horror Show.
Yes, thank you so much, Ryan.
Thank you so much, guys. It's been a pleasure. Looking forward to chatting with you guys soon, okay?
All right.
All right, take care, Ryan.
All right, have a good one, guys. Stay safe.
Yeah.
Horror Show exclusive.
Welcome back, everyone. I hope you guys enjoyed that interview with Ryan Joseph Murphy. That guy's pretty cool. I can't wait to do some collaborations with him. Can't wait to see his narrator mix it up with Elliot. The first one is The Platform on Netflix. Quite a few horror fans have been talking about it the past couple weeks. It was released in 2019, but just hit Netflix in 2020. It's The Platform, directed by Galder Gaztelu Ureta. It's written by David De Sola and Pedro Rivera. It's a film from Spain starring Ivan Masag, he's from Pan's Labyrinth, as Goreng, Zorian Eguilior as Trimagazi, the old man that he's trapped on the platform with, Antonia San Juan as Imagiri. It's about a man who wakes up in a vertical prison with an unknown amount of levels, 2 prisoners on each level, and they get 2 minutes a day to eat from a table with enough food for all levels, but that's only if everyone takes their fair share, and you know that cannot happen in this world.
Okay, so this is my attempt to explain how this prison works. It's an unspecified dystopian future where the Spanish government has developed special prisons. In these unique prisons, there are over 200 rooms, each taking place on different levels. Each room descends further and further down. A bounty of food is prepared with enough portions to feed everyone, on every level. So the food is placed on a platform, and it starts at level 1, goes down to 2, all the way to past to 200. Before it's reached all the levels, the food is completely gone because the prisoners always eat more than they really need. It leaves people at the lower levels it leaves them starving, and it forces them to resort to violence and cannibalism in order to survive. So it's a very obvious metaphor for how capitalism works, and how when the wealth sits at the top, it never trickles down, even though there's enough for everybody there. And it's a pretty blunt metaphor that you'd have to be really trying hard not to get it.
It's almost so obvious that it clubs you over the head with the metaphor, but I think that was the point.
Mm-hmm.
I think he was meant it to be that obvious. I think that's why the characters say the word obvious over 30 times throughout the movie.
That becomes a gag too, doesn't it?
Yeah, obvio.
As a note, this is a Spanish film, and if you're like me, you absolutely hate dubbed movies. So just a warning, if you want to watch this the proper way before you get this started, it's available on Netflix. Go switch the language settings to Spanish and put the audio in Spanish and put the subtitles on English, because I started off with the bad version. Got on my nerves really fast.
I couldn't imagine watching that in English. So much of the effectiveness is the way they talked and the way they enunciated things. As obvious as it was, I think it still had a lot of suspense, gore, and really intense scenes, and also a air of mystery about it. Where, who is this girl that rides up and down the platform? Who are the people that get in the cell with him? It kind of unfolds as it goes. So it paints itself as being very obvious, but there's also a lot of mystery in there to keep you interested and keep you invested through the whole thing.
I think a lot of what really makes this work is the actors, because I think my favorite part of the movie is I'd say the first 30 minutes or so, the beginning portion, when the main character is in his cell with his older roommate, as you might want to call it. Cellmate is a better word. And it stays in this very confined room, and it reminds me a little bit of Saw. You know, the type of scenario where you're trapped in a room together, but it draws it out for a lot longer. And I love things that take place within very closed and confined spaces and make you feel like you're in there with the characters. But then the movies, the further they go down into the different levels and the more they explore, the movie starts to grow and feel more and more expansive the more characters you get to meet. So it starts off as like a chamber drama and then expands to something much bigger by the end of all of it.
And I love how the rooms are the cells are so empty. It's just these bland, bare walls, and the only thing you see besides those bare walls is the people, the gore when things go wrong, and then that table of food that comes up. And depending on which level you're on, it's either a smorgasbord of well-crafted, well-prepared food, or it's just nastiness, and people have pissed on it and spit on it.
I was actually kind of shocked by the level of gore and violence in this movie, and I like that it's taking a very serious social concept, and it's debatable. I'm not going to get into political ideologies right now, but I like how it uses the ideology of socialism and capitalism being bad by injecting direct horror imagery into it. I was cringing at the parts where people had to start cutting into their own flesh to eat, start eating, to start feasting. There are a couple of moments where I was just fucking squirming. I didn't expect this film to be as gory as it ended up being.
Those first few scenes really set the tone for the whole thing. Like the Trimagazi character, that old man, he just sets the tone for a whole thing, and he explains the concept without ever feeling like he's explaining it. You just feel that's that character just running at his mouth, and he's just so confident in the way he speaks, and he's really dominant over the main character for the first part. And I love what he says. I think that this is what sets the tone for the whole movie. He says, there are those at the top and those at the bottom, and then there are those who fall.
Mhm.
And that sets the tone for the whole thing. It really puts you in the mood of what you're about to see.
These cellmates are not stuck in the same room. The way it works is that 1 month you will be, say you're on level 5. You're doing great if you're on level 5 because it's so high up by the time that the food gets to you that there's plenty left over. You can be in level 5 living like a king for a full month. But then once the month is over, you're going to wake up with your cellmate in a different room. And if you're really, especially below 200, you basically are going to have to figure out a way to survive, because by the time the food gets down there, it's as you just described, it's nasty, it's disgusting. Occasionally a dead body will show up on the platform because people end up going so crazy that they end up killing themselves, which is an obvious metaphor for how people suffer under a capitalism or an uncaring system.
And another fascinating thing about it to me is you never know which level they're going to wake up on. It's not like they advance to the higher levels like I thought it was going to be.
It's totally random.
You could go from the bottom all the way up to the top, and I think whoever's running the platform is trying to teach people, say, hey, be nice, share, take only your fair share, because watch the way you treat the people below you, because they could be above you next. But most of the people didn't learn that lesson. That the mentality they had is like, those people shit on me and pissed on me while they're on top, so now that I'm on top, I'm going to shit and piss on them,
Yeah.
It's like they're completely missing the point of the message, and I think that's the majority of people in this world miss the point.
There's a lot to think about in this movie. I mean, with such a complicated premise, I don't know if it's a complicated premise, but it's such a unique premise that I did notice just a couple of flaws. Like one flaw that I didn't understand. I mean, the movie doesn't explain why it's this way, but I'll accept it. Is the main character doesn't have to be there. Most of the people in each of these cells are prisoners, or they did something really bad and this is their punishment. He's going there to get an accredited diploma, so it's self-imposed. And in the movie we meet one doctor who voluntarily joins the program so she could see what it's like for herself. So that's the only thing, is that some of the rules are not 100% clear to me. And I'm not sure how well the metaphor works. Just for the simple part is that the simple fact that in a real capitalist system, there are different levels and different people at the bottom, people at the top. But people at the top don't wake up, usually for the most part, don't end up at the bottom from month to month, and people at the bottom don't just go to the top. It would be really nice if in a system like this, if plumbers got to experience what it would be like to be the 1%, and the 1% experience what it's like to live very poor. Maybe the fact that they turn around is done purposefully so people can understand that compassion is in short supply, and just because you end up at the top or you know what it's like to be at the bottom doesn't mean that when you get to a better place you're going to be a better person.
I think they focus on that main character, on that protagonist, because he's the one person that's different from the others, and I think that's why the doctor puts herself in there, because she's fascinated by him. Mm-hmm. And she keeps asking him, why the fuck would you bring a book? Like, everyone can bring one thing. Mm-hmm. And she was fascinated that he chose to bring a book. He's the only one out of all those 200 and something levels that chose to bring a book, and she had to go in there and study him and see why he did that. And she also got in there, she was trying to plead with people and teach them to have solidarity. Like, they kept mentioning spontaneous solidarity towards the end. They were trying to get people to come together and help each other and realize that if we all organize themselves, there's enough for everyone.
In the movie, people respond more to punishment than they do to compassion. There's an ending in this movie that kind of, I'm not going to ruin it, but it kind of gives hope that we as a species could evolve beyond our greed and our inability to look at other people's plight. So I think the movie ends on a hopeful note. When discussing this movie, I mean, we did mention that it was gory. I feel like we're kind of undercutting that part, because so much of it has to do with the high concept and so much of it has to do with the metaphor, with the blunt metaphor, that this movie is going to be a lot more shocking than you realize. There are a handful of scenes where I was cringing. I couldn't even look at the screen. I thought the gore effects were really realistic in the sense they didn't look like gore effects. They just looked like people who were cutting themselves apart. I thought it was pretty brutal. The sound effects are pretty wet. It's weird because it's not the type of violence or gore that's meant to get you excited. It's kind of blunt and brutal and disturbing. But it's not like the film we were discussing last week, The Golden Glove, where it's just put there to sicken you. It exists somewhere in between, something exciting for gorehounds and something terribly realistic. But it all works and it's all very effective. And I like that he uses those types of horror imagery to explore the concept. There's a lot to process in the movie, a lot to think about. This is going to work differently for every person who watches it, and I think that your political affiliations and your ideology, what you believe, is going to shade how you perceive this movie and what your opinions on it are, because if you're ultra right-wing or you're extremely libertarian, you're probably going to think this movie is bullshit.
I know that the people on bottom are in the worst shape because they have no food to survive because the people up top are such gluttons. But what I didn't quite grasp was how they were explaining how the people up top had it rough too, because the people up top have nothing to look forward to, so they commit suicide.
This film is trying to do a lot, for one thing, and that might be one flaw where I'm like, I kind of get what you're trying to say, but I don't think that's necessarily true. I doubt people who have been living a month on floor on level 200 where they're starving and they have to resort to murder and cannibalism and eating their cellmate is going to kill themselves because they're presented with a big feast every day, big bounty every day. So I'm not sure if I buy that aspect either. But hey, any film with such a loaded concept and such a blunt metaphor is going to run into a lot of little flaws, nitpicks. And there's a lot about this movie that I can nitpick. I don't think it's perfect, but it's such a fascinating film that even its flaws are kind of fascinating.
I'll tell you some of the things I learned in this movie, what I seen presented. It was presented so clear, it's almost like they spelled it out for me in front of my face. First of all, frightened people are dangerous.
Yeah.
And if I kill you, it's not my fault. It's the fault of the people above me. Be nice on your way to the top. You never know who you'll cross paths with. If people would only take their fair share, there would be enough for all. And I like how the one character calls the prison a vertical self-management center.
I guess in some ways it is, because some people are there voluntarily. Not everybody who's in there is forced to be there. The reason this movie, we decided to watch it, is because it actually came out in February, but it's become a big hit now during the quarantine. And with the way that things are going, where supermarkets are selling out every day, where people are hoarding food and hoarding toilet paper, hoarding supplies, and some people can't get anything and they're stuck in their homes and being advised to stay, I think this movie came out at the right time, at just the right time. Because I didn't really hear too much about this in February. If this had come out a couple of years before, it might have just missed hitting the zeitgeist the way that it does right now. I think the fact that it relates so much to right now is what's pushed it over the top and made it such a big Netflix hit.
I like how it says the message has to be delivered at all costs, but then they show at the end it's not so clear what the message is. Like, they think the message is one thing and then they figure out it's another.
I don't mind ambiguity in films. I like films that don't spell things out, that are kind of ambiguous. But I think the fact that so much of this movie spends a lot of its time being blunt about what its message is, the fact that by the end the ending comes across a little muddled, where you don't know what the message is anymore, is a little bit of a flaw to me, because I was like, if you're going to build up this whole thing to be such a solid metaphor, you should have kept it up at the end, because by the end, I'm not sure what they mean by the end, because I think it gets a little bit muddled, and I think the message is kind of confusing.
I'll tell you the message it left me, and tell me if you agree with this. It left me feeling that they're telling me that children are the future. We are too far gone. We must sacrifice ourselves to pay for our own mistakes so they can thrive.
It's a pretty grim message, isn't it?
Yeah.
I guess I could see that. It's better than any explanation I could come up for it, because I didn't really understand what the message was by the end of it, but they were trying to say with the little girl and the panna cotta. The ending involves a little girl and a piece of fancy dessert.
It throws so many messages at me. I was constantly looking for the messages all the way up to the end. I think that's why I came up with that last message.
Like I said, I have some of my complaints about it. I think that it's because of the level of ambition that there's bound to be a lot of plot, not necessarily plot holes, but lapses of logic here and there. But overall, I think it's a pretty ballsy movie. It's a pretty daring movie. And I think it's a movie of now, which makes it worth watching while you're in quarantine, especially if you have Netflix. Definitely worth a watch. But just be warned, if you're, and you know who you are, if you lean one way politically, it's probably just going to irritate you the whole way through. It's not going to be for everybody, but if you're open-minded and you're willing to see a unique horror film with heavy political leanings, definitely worth your time.
Our next one we watched is another one from 2019, just got released in 2020. This one was on Shudder. It's The Room that we mentioned before. It's directed and co-written by Christian Volkmann. He's a French director. And it stars Olga Kurylenko. She was a Bond girl in Quantum of Solace and was also in Max Payne and Hitman. And Kevin Janssens. Did you recognize Kevin Janssens, the husband?
Where is he from? He's
the douchebag from Revenge.
Yep, I knew I recognized him.
And he was much better in this. I mean, he was good in Revenge, but I hated him. But I liked him a lot more in this. It's about a young couple. These two people are a young couple who move into a big isolated house and find a room that gives them literally everything they want. Of course, it's a blessing in disguise, and there's a catch. Especially the wife uses the room to create a baby. Okay,
I'll be honest with you. I think I admired this film more than I enjoyed it. I thought, I think the acting is solid. I think it's fairly well directed. I think some of it is pretty original even. And I like the way that the room functions, and I like that it gave the room itself opens it up to very unique imagery and scenes that you don't usually see in horror films.
Yeah.
But overall, I had a hard time buying some of the couple's decisions in a way that kind of undermined the film for me. For one, I don't think their reaction to the room was very realistic.
No.
At all. I didn't really find it believable, because once they realize the room gives you whatever you want, whatever you ask for, they get a little bit spooked by this, but then they just keep on going and creating new things because the room will give them whatever they want. I think most rational people who would end up in this type of situation would be scared shitless and probably try to stay away from the room and probably try to move away from the house. I didn't find the reactions to it realistic, and I think the way that they just jumped into it without thinking about it much, and they seemed a little surprised by what was happening, but not surprised enough.
Yeah.
What's happening is too mind-blowing to have such a casual reaction to. Where constantly throughout the movie I was like, really? You're presented with this unbelievable conundrum, this situation that should be impossible by every account, and you're reacting so mildly to it. So that kind of undermined the film for me.
There's so many story beats that are a little convoluted, and it's way too convenient in order to get a certain story beat in. I don't think they were careful enough with the story to tell it properly. I think like for instance, why did it take them so long to realize that you can't take things from the room out of the house?
I found that a little bit unbelievable too, because I understand that the room gives you everything you want, but realistically, I mean, unless you're quarantined like we are right now, you're gonna have to step outside your house to pay bills, to do a lot of stuff. And it's a long time before the main character steps out of his house and realizes that he can't have all those outside.
And he reacts like, oh, what?
And
you didn't figure that out yet?
And what I don't understand is, like, how are they paying rent and how are they paying bills? If the money can only exist inside the house, once it leaves the house, it deteriorates. What's the point of having the money and how are they able to survive? So there are a couple things that I kept questioning. I was like, wait, that doesn't make sense. Their reaction isn't believable. Despite most of its flaws, and I think this is even more flawed than the platform is, I still think it's definitely an interesting viewing. I was never bored by any of it, and I was engaged the whole way through. I just kept questioning whether or not any of this was believable. And mind you, I'm not talking about the room itself. I could suspend my disbelief that something incredible is happening in the room. I have a harder time suspending my disbelief with the characters' reactions to it, which I don't find very realistic, and I never understood how they paid bills. That's just a problem that bothered me throughout the whole flick.
Yeah, and then they were all happy with it, and then all of a sudden they became all grim and tortured. All of a sudden they have this major problem in their mentalities, and this major problem in their marriage. I'm like, where did this all creep up from? They didn't really tell this very well.
They didn't, and I think that's another problem, is that the marital rifts that they start to experience seem like they're more of a convenient plot device to move the story forward than they do feel like they don't feel like organic marital rifts between people. There's nothing to lead me to believe that their relationship is suddenly this grim, this bad, and this awful. Didn't buy it.
I think there was a really good movie in there somewhere.
Mm-hmm.
Because there were enough good things about it to keep me interested throughout. It just way too many eye roll moments, where it got a little bit too convoluted, and it just kept being convoluted. But I did like when the baby entered the movie. A lot of interesting things going on, but it's just too discombobulated. It doesn't follow its own rules, basically.
I feel like they kept a lot of the rules vague as far as the internal logic of how the room works, just so that they could flip the story at any point that they wanted. By keeping rules vague, they don't really have to follow anything, and I think that's a problem. The climax was visually interesting and kind of fascinating in how it played out, but I think it was a tad convoluted for its own good. The way that the ending works, the way that they kind of get trapped, the way that the son appears doesn't make sense to me, because within the context of the movie, it doesn't make sense that he would appear in such a fashion. And I don't want to specify what it is, but the child goes through such a change that doesn't seem like the room would have been capable of gifting him with this change. It doesn't really make sense.
Exactly.
So it's too much, it's too fast and too loose with all of its own rules. It changes the story beats on a dime just to push itself forward. I think it has some good atmosphere here and there. I think it's definitely fascinating to watch just because the concept keeps you paying attention, but ultimately not enough for me.
By the end, for me, the bad outweighed the good, but I think there was still a lot of good stuff going on. I thought it looked really good, very well filmed.
Yes.
I thought the performances of the two main characters and the son were all really good. I even think a handful of the scenes were really directed very well.
I feel like, though, that the movie kind of lets the actors down, because I feel like everybody gives the type of committed performance that could really sell this kind of story if the script took a little bit more time to try to develop its concept and try to understand it to a much greater degree. And that's another thing. I don't get the feeling that the filmmakers fully understood what they were doing with the room or what it was capable of.
Look at the difference between this one and The Platform. Both have strong messages that they're trying to tell, and even though The Platform is all over the place with its messages, the writing is very focused.
Mm-hmm.
And as focused as it was in The Platform, that's how unfocused it was in The Room, and I think that's where the movie went wrong. Otherwise, there was a lot good going for it.
This is how I would contrast the two movies. I think they're both heavily flawed. However, the flaws from The Platform come from the fact that that it's such an ambitious concept that they're putting so much level of detail into it that there's no way you could invent a fictional concept like that, something that doesn't exist in the real world, without coming up with some kind of flaws in the logic. So some of those flaws are forgivable to me because it's a product of overwriting. For me, The Room, it's the opposite. The flaws are frustrating because I get the feeling that you don't even know why this is functioning the way it is or what the rules are for it.
Yeah.
And like I said, there's a lot to see in this movie, lots of good acting, some interesting visuals, good camera work. I like the location. I like the house. I like the child actor who plays the son. I thought that amounted in some really creepy shit throughout the movie.
Yeah.
This movie needed a lot more focus for what it was going for.
Yeah. I would still recommend it. I mean, watch it. It's interesting. There's a good movie in there, but I just didn't like it that much overall.
So those are our 2020 horror movies. We're going to go back a little bit further because Mike and I caught up on some other horror films too.
Yeah, there's one I've been meaning to watch for the longest because I heard the actor Pat Healy. He came on the Movie Crypt podcast, and it was a really cool interview. This is Cheap Thrills from 2013. It's directed by E.L. Katz, and he went on to do a segment in ABCs of Death 2. He also did some of the Scream series, TV series. He also did a few episodes of Channel Zero and Swamp Thing. The writers are David Chirchillo, Trent Haga, and it's based on a short story by Ronald Dahl. It stars Ethan Embry, Pat Healy, David Koechner is awesome in this, and Sarah Paxton. David Koechner and Sarah Paxton play a rich couple who finds a couple of down on their luck losers in a bar, played by Ethan Embry and Pat Healy, and make them complete increasingly insane challenges for money.
I like this movie a lot.
Me too.
I thought first off, all the performance in this movie is really solid. I believed everybody in their roles. They seem like real people. I felt like the Pat Healy and Ethan Embry, their character, their friendship functions in a way that I've seen a lot of friendships actually function. There's always that one guy who's a little bit stronger and tougher who looks out for the other one who's a little bit weaker. But they still have a kind of brotherly bond and a brotherly connection with them. And I really like David Koechner in this. I'm mostly familiar with him through The Office.
Yeah.
What was his character's name? I hated his character every time he showed up in The Office.
Yeah.
I wanted him to get the fuck off the screen because he irritated me. So Packard.
Yeah.
Couldn't stand him. And I don't like to do this with actors, but I've had a biased feeling where I normally don't do this, but he becomes a turnoff whenever I see him on screen just because I associate with him with that role. Here, strangely enough, he's a much worse person than Packard is on The Office, but I couldn't see enough of him. I thought he was fascinating. I thought that there's a lot of mystery between his relationship with Sarah Paxton. Yeah. I like that the movie doesn't spell out who they are or what their past is. You just know that they're a rich couple. They want to see some fucked up shit, and they're taking advantage of poor people for their own entertainment and their amusement. And I think the fact that you know so little about them or how their relationship formed keeps them more watchable throughout the whole thing. And at first, they seem like a very mismatched couple. They don't seem like they belong together. They go together. But the further this goes along, it makes sense why they're together. They're both very sick people who like wallowing in the depravity and suffering of others, and they have the money and the bankroll to push it as far as they want to take it.
Yeah, and I love how all the characters, you slowly learn who they really are, and like one of the best twists I've seen was when they tried to rob the couple. And then they see a glimpse of a picture right before the twist happens. You know what I'm talking about?
And they realize that they made a big mistake trying to rob them. What made it even more surprising is the couple didn't even seem that bothered that they were being robbed and kind of put the situation back on its head. That gives them more of an air of mystery because you're like, who are these people? I also like the writing between the two main characters, Craig and Vince, because the relationship, the type of friendship that they have, isn't really fully revealed until the end of the movie. I feel like the movie kind of lets out little crumbs all throughout, just so you can get an idea of the type of friendship they have. But it's when they're with the couple and they're forced to do a lot of disgusting, insane shit that you understand the dynamics of their friendship a lot better, just by a line of throwaway dialogue here or a line of dialogue there. And man, does this movie have a great way of topping itself as the further it goes along. I was hooked the entire time, and I was kind of, because I really cared for the main characters, I was filled with a sense of dread throughout the entire time because I knew that at some point that everything was going to get worse because they keep paying them to do worse and worse shit, and it escalates and escalates and escalates and pushes them into situations that they never thought that they'd be in. And it turns out that the one person who you thought was a better person is actually not.
Yeah, and I started thinking, how are they going to keep this up? Because it got increasingly insane so early in the movie. I'm like, where are they going to go from here? And they managed to keep a hold of that excitement all the way to the last frame.
Yes.
And another thing I took away from this is, holy shit, Ethan Embry is a great fucking actor, dude. Back in the Can't Hardly Wait days, he was like a little skinny, little goofy guy. And then I see The Devil's Candy, and I'm like, holy shit, this guy can act. And then I see him in this, I'm like, oh my God, you believe every word he says. You believe he's that person. And when he turns out to be a shitty person, you believe that he's a shitty person.
Strangely enough, he's the character who I felt the most for and I had the most sympathy for. Even though the main character, his best friend, is more of a sad sack and more of a loser than he is, I felt more compassion for his friend because they both kind of reveal themselves to be not that great of people, but at least his friend is a little bit more honest and upfront about who he is. The main character lies to himself about how shitty he actually is and tries to come up with weak justifications for his actions and why he's in the situation that he is. So for that reason, I kind of gravitated toward Ethan Embry's character, who's initially less sympathetic, turns out to be a more sympathetic character, at least in my view. Really good writing, dude, the dynamics and everything.
And I thought it was fascinating how they slowly reveal the animosity in this friendship. But what's even more fascinating about it is you can tell that it's an animosity that never would have surfaced if they hadn't gone through this experience together. Mm-hmm. I mean, they hadn't seen each other in 5 years. But they probably wouldn't have seen each other for another 5. They would have got together for drinks and yucking it up and just go on about their business. But then when they were stuck together in this insane situation, that's when the animosity came out. I thought it was a really fascinating study of friendship.
It was. And what's weird is to make a movie that's a study of friendship amidst all of the ghastly on-screen happenings that are going on.
Yeah.
The level of depravity that this movie sinks to will never cease to amaze me throughout its entire runtime. It got to the point that, I'm not going to ruin it, but there's a certain scene in the movie that made my stomach turn. I couldn't even look at the screen full on because I felt myself gagging at what I was seeing and what I was watching, at the level that these two are willing to sink to just to get some cash, and the way that they try to top each other and bully each other. And the reason that there's so much animosity in the way it comes out is because when the rich couple offers them money, they put out a dare, but the person who completes the depraved task first is the one who's going to get the money. So it involves sex, self-mutilation, eating of animals that are just disgusting. Some of it really actually made me feel physically ill, and I know you know what scene I'm talking about, and the audience will too. When they get to that scene, you're going to be ill. I was like, did this movie really go to that level? Did they need to? Yeah. And I kind of feel like the movie goes a little bit too far with its depravity, but that's what makes it so exciting, and that's what makes it so unpredictable, and that's what makes it feel dangerous. It feels that it's kind of stepping over the line when you don't expect it to. It doesn't present itself as a movie that's willing to cross certain exploitation lines, or that's willing to go there, but it is. And you get the sense that this couple, if the people that they're daring to do these crazy things are into it, the less they are into it. If they're paying them hundreds of dollars to do something depraved and the person seems excited to do it, they're no longer excited to do it. They only want to see people wallow in suffering and misery and torture.
One scene that made me cringe way more than I thought it would is where they show a bit of violence right at the end. Mm-hmm. Like violence, and they only show the character doing the violence. They don't show what's happening to the other character. And that just made me feel sick. Mm-hmm. Just the sound effects and the look on his face, and that bothered me. You didn't even need to see it, you know?
You spend a lot of the time, you're really engaged in all of the characters because these are all very fascinating people that feel very real. But along with you being fascinated, you're disgusted, you're repulsed, but you're laughing too. where you
Yeah.
do the same effect where I would the movie kind of kept throwing me between two extremes. I'd be either really laughing my ass off at how ridiculous this is getting and how absurd and how over the top it was, and as soon
Yeah.
as I'm done laughing, I'm presented with something that makes me feel a little disgusted and a little sick.
Yeah.
But as soon as that feeling feels like it's going too long, you're presented with something else that made you laugh.
Yeah.
It's that balance of really, really, really dark, macabre humor with complete and utter filth and depravity amidst a character study that I feel makes this a really unique movie.
And when you're watching it, you're thinking, oh, this is a really good comedy. And then you watch it further, this is a really good drama. And then you watch it further, this is a really good horror film. And then you realize it's all of them equally.
Of all the movies I've seen this week, this is by far my favorite of the ones that I've seen. I personally would highly recommend it to anybody to watch.
Yeah,
Even
I
that you
believe
have
this
to
is
stomach.
this is my favorite too. It shows the lengths that poor people will go to for money. It shows how good men can become bad, and it also shows how bad men can become good, and sometimes when it's too late.
I think that this movie had a really great ending. Whereas, like I said, I enjoyed the platform, but I thought it got a little muddled at the end. I thought the climax of The Room was a little bit confusing. This
Yeah.
was a film that was an interesting concept that ended exactly how it should have ended. It left you with a certain feeling, and it left you with a lot to think about. And the ideas that it's trying to push are very clear without being too blunt about it, without being too...
Yeah.
You never feel like you're being preached to. I feel like that the message comes through you through the depravity, the story, and how far the script goes with each scene.
I had a lot of fun with it, and I laughed a lot at it, and it also made me feel something. So it's a great movie overall.
If you want to laugh, be repulsed, and then left with something to chew on and think about after, this is your movie. And it's
Cool.
available on Amazon Prime or Shudder.
Our next movie is also from Shudder. This is pure comedy right here. It went all the way back to 1985 to The Stuff. And I'm kicking myself in the ass that I never saw this. I've been meaning to see it for the longest. I finally did. It's written and directed by the great Larry Cohen, who directed It's Alive, God Told Me To, and Q the Winged Serpent. Q the Winged Serpent is another one I've been sleeping on. I need to watch that, but I think I'll watch it with Joe Bob. So this centers around a gooey new dessert on the market called The Stuff that turns people into mindless gluttons. I watched it on the Arrow Video Blu-ray, which is pretty cool.
I watched it streaming, I believe, on Amazon Prime. The movie itself it's kind of dumb. It's completely ridiculous. It's not the least bit believable in any way, but it's a total blast to watch from start to finish. Just the sheer insanity of what they're trying to do on screen. I like all the visuals where the stuff is an ice cream. They never explain what exactly it is, do they? They found this stuff in the ground and
It just kind of bubbles up from the ground, yeah, and they actually suck it straight from the ground straight into manufacturing, so they don't even stop to process it or anything.
Yeah.
or test it.
The FDA characters in this movie are fucking terrible. They're not doing their job. The thing that most struck me about this movie is the fact that it's such a cheesy movie is the cast. You have Dan Aiello pop up in a part. Then you see Paul Sorvino, who is Paulie in Goodfellas, pop up as this type of conservative missionary military character who is out to destroy communism or anybody who wants to challenge the American way of life. And then you got Abe Vigoda from The Godfather pop up in a little odd role. You just see all of these prestige actors coming in and out of the movie just looking like they're having a good time.
My favorite was Garrett Morris.
Oh.
He was so good in it. And Michael Moriarty, the main protagonist, I've always loved that guy. And just this movie seems so out of character for him. Mm-hmm. At first it was distracting. I could not believe him as that type of character at all. But as it goes along, he just owns it so well that you have to love it. It's a really fun performance by him. I've never seen him get quite that goofy.
I really liked most of the makeup effects in this movie, and I really liked how they made the ice cream seem like it was a threatening presence, the way that it moves and expands and enlarges. I'm really curious. I don't know if you watch any special features on the Blu-ray or Explains, how they actually created that gop and made it seem like it was alive in the way that it spreads and moves.
Well, they used different things depending on the scene. A lot of the stuff that showed in the streets was blended fish bones. So a lot of it was blended fish bones, and the rest of it was ice cream, yogurt, fire extinguisher foam, and really bad animation.
Okay.
Oh, that animation was awful. And come to find out, Larry Cohen hired this effects company to do the effects, and they did such a bad job. I think he cut a lot of them, and he only paid them half of what they're supposed to be paid, and they ended up taking him to court. I thought it was a fun little mystery and little conspiracy, and if you notice, it's another one about consumerism and like class warfare and rich people taking advantage of the poor. This seems to be a running theme this week. As bad as the animation was, the practical effects were really good. Like when the stuff would start expanding in people and their mouths would open all very large and just start oozing out of all their orifices, I thought that was really cool effects.
That was probably the best thing about the movie was the effects. I like the way, like you said, how their mouths kind of widen to the point where it's so exaggerated, the way that they're stretched out so the stuff can come out kind of like a living thing. I thought some of the effects looked fake, but I don't see that as a detriment to the movie because it only enhances the humor. I'm thinking in particular as one of the main characters, when they have the stuff inside of them, their face expands and their mouth expands so much that their head just kind of bursts open and they're left with a mask on the floor. It looks so fake to see them. It looks so fake and so cheesy, but I couldn't stop laughing when I saw it.
There's no him-hawing around with this movie. Like you see the stuff, it opens with, you see the stuff bubbling out of the ground, and it goes straight to a commercial for the stuff. And then you keep seeing these commercials throughout. You even see them, a scene with people filming a commercial for the stuff. Did you recognize the room where the stuff was climbing up the walls and the ceiling? That was the rotating room from Nightmare on Elm Street. It totally looked like it. Once you could almost see the room rotating when you seen the stuff climbing the wall, but it looked really cool though. Once again, at this one, it's about rich people making money off poison that can kill you, and they know it. So they
sell it as ice cream.
Yeah, and it's inspired by corporate greed, consumerism, and the damaging products that are being sold to people. And which is a very real reality. I'm looking at you, McDonald's.
There's a pretty serious message behind it and a lot of social satire, but the movie doesn't even seem to take its own message very seriously. It just seems to be thrown out there in a really goofy way, so it has a really fun spirit. I wouldn't even call this a message movie or even a satire, despite the fact that there's a lot of satire present, only because I don't think that was the primary goal of this film. I think what they were trying to do was craft a cheesy B movie that people would have a good time at and something for people to laugh at.
The comedy is delivered in such a deadpan way. Like they seem to be taking it so seriously. It's Michael Moriarty seems to be the only one that's really yucking it up. Like, what if you start to take the movie too seriously, you just see the way he acts and you have to chuckle a little bit.
I kind of feel like Michael Moriarty was in on the joke. And where the other actors don't seem to be in on the joke, but I get the feeling it's because Larry Cohen didn't want him to be in on the joke.
I'm not actually sure what happened, but I read that in an interview that Garrett Morris was asked about Larry Cohen, and all he would say was, "My mother told me if you're not going to say anything good about somebody, then don't say anything at all," and then he wouldn't mention them again. It's like, damn, what happened there? Not many special features on the Blu-ray, but it does have a very extensive featurette with a lot of interviews with mostly Larry Cohen, the actors, some of the crew, and others. And there's some really great stories in there.
It's available on Amazon Prime and Shudder.
Thanks so much, everybody, for watching another installment of our podcast from Lockdown. The future of Horror Show is uncertain right now. We are looking for sponsors. And it looks like we're going to need sponsors for season 3. So anybody out there who knows any sponsors who would like to get on board with Horror Show, just let us know. Check out all updates on everything we do, from the feature film to our short films to the TV series to the podcast. Check out facebook.com/Pickles Horror Show or at Pickles Horror Show on Instagram. And again, check out Ryan Joseph Murphy. Welcome to the Horror Show. Check him out on Instagram at Your Horror Show or facebook.com/Your Horror Show. And look out for a collaboration between us, hopefully in the future.
If the audience needs any way to reach out to us, or if you have any questions or concerns, just direct it to either our messages on our Instagram or our Facebook page. That's the best way, and then we'll get it.
All right. Thanks for listening, everyone, and thanks for watching.
Till next week, happy
Happy
horror.
horror.